I'd like to expand some more on the video I did 2 weeks ago discussing invention and science. I figure a deeper look into the intertwined history of science, engineering, and invention is a good way to figure out why they are so mashed together in the American psyche. Prior to the 1600s, science didn't exist. It just wasn't there. There was philosophy, arts, and engineering. This dichotomy difference actually for the most part all originated in religion, and there was no system to get inaccuracies out easily, if at all. Civilization grew creating math and other forms of philosophy, which created engineering, more often than not used for war, monument building, or city planning, or toys for the rich. Philosophers were in charge of education, almost always of wealthy youths, and hypothesizing about the universe, but without much of a methodical system to check their ideas against reality. They had the origins of peer review with debate and rhetoric, but as they were all dealing with hypotheticals, they really didn't get very far. From Greece to China, philosophers would go around and challenge other philosophers publicly to a debate and try and beat them for bragging rights. Science and invention were entangled in what we know of as art. Using engineering and philosophy, these useful arts would be commissioned by the very rich to make revolutionary complex inventions to act as toys for them. As it was considered art, the technology was kept as trade secret and often died with the inventor. For examples of this amazing technology before its time, check out the video in the below bar by my significant other Archifantasies about the Antikytheria mechanism, an extremely complex clockwork mechanism made by an ancient Greek artist to act as a solar lunar calendar, as well as brief discussions on some other inventions like the southward-facing card in China or steam-driven moving statues in Rome. All these inventions could have changed the shape of the world had the knowledge been freely available, but because of how invention was viewed as a hidden art, no better methods were developed on this technology. It's why Archimedes and Da Vinci were so lauded in their time, as they were able to master philosophy, engineering, and art in their time and secure funding from the wealthy for it to create and design amazing inventions and discoveries for their time. It is from these people that our mythology of the modern scientist in Dexter's Lab system caricature began to form. With the elements of science fragmented between the fields and hidden away from use, religion remained the final answer for everything, and it was able to rule most of the world. Philosophy and the useful arts were looked on as toys for the rich with no use to the poor, which was why the Library of Alexandria was burned down, and quite often knowledge was lost when an empire fell. However, science was still in the realm of monks and alchemists who went around trying to get sponsorship from the rich nobles in an attempt to create the Philosopher's Stone. Science as we know it was kind of an emerging concept that took many different mimetic forms as society from 500 BCE to the 1800s kept shifting around and trying different configurations of thinking and operating. One of the major concepts that occurred was the invention of the printing press, suddenly making knowledge available to everyone. Francis Bacon is also attributed to be the first one to come up with the first concept of the scientific method. Then another major thing occurred, a land with plenty of food for everyone. The old way of thinking was that kings and rulers should be the people who have the greatest ability to procure themselves food, so their minds could work the best. A brand new fertile land was discovered where 95% of the inhabitants had been wiped out by our diseases accidentally, from 1492 to the 1590s, and now any settler could have as much food as they were willing to work for. This began to generate the idea of self-rule, and in this plenty, the new American colonists began eating and reading books like crazy to perfect themselves to be philosopher kings of themselves. Useful arts became more available to the people, and inventions began to erupt. This freedom and learning bug hit the European continent as well as political and knowledge reform began to come about. In the early 1800s, Johann Beckmann proposed the idea that the useful arts should be taught freely and to many people to transform the world. It was then that he first coined the word technology. From this, more and more people were able to perform experiments, and on the heels of the Enlightenment, experimenters began realizing they were no longer philosophers, but science artists or scientists. The explosion in new ideas, inventions, and discoveries was ripe. Ideas right out in front of you if you just knew how to use science and repeat experiments. Much of this history and even deeper comes from the book What Technology Wants by Kevin Kelly. Oh, and be skeptical of his hunter-gatherer depictions. They aren't entirely accurate according to anthropologists. He points out that as more people began delving into science and invention, all new technologies are pretty much inevitable, and what we remember in terms of invention is who got to it first. Had that person not made it, there's always a competitor right on his heels trying to discover or invent the idea first. We remember Einstein because of the fact that he's considered to be 10 years ahead of his time, which is astounding. We would have figured it out in at least 10 years' time, but Einstein figured out the problem even faster than the technology would have predicted, which is why he's so highly praised. New technology is inevitable. With so many eyes looking at it, it just requires access to many people to solve the problem faster. It's why crowdsourcing in science is becoming a big thing and has allowed science to process data using untrained populations so much faster. Planet Hunter and Foldit are just two websites that allow anyone to contribute to science without a degree. The individual scientist is still a long-held icon in America that will hopefully diminish as time goes on. An individual inventor, yes, but until robots become mainstream, spurring another boom as a tool in research, scientists will continue to have to work in teams with many people working under them to determine the truth. The individual scientists never existed. Even if they made major discoveries, they were just the first. Technology was already leading the world in that direction. Darwin only published as quickly as he did because he realized Wallace was on to the same issue, and if neither of them had discovered it, there were at least 4 others that would have proposed natural selection in the next 10 years. Most of the individual scientists we idealize were more individual inventors, and usually in fields that just so happen to be ripe with possibilities that could have not happened until the technological and social infrastructure was in place to allow creativity in that particular field. The electrical world was opened up because there was so much room for it to grow because of the availability of the materials and machining as well as engineers. Had certain factors occurred prior, we may have never heard of the names Tesla or Edison, but they were the best in their field, and had they come earlier or later in history, they may have not been able to compete as well with other branches of invention. Gates and Jobs were at the right place socioeconomically and at the right time in history to be on the ground floor with the right tuned minds for the puzzle at hand. It's why you should push yourself to keep learning, because you never know when you could get on the ground floor of a new wave of invention. My predictions are the next wave of big-name inventors will come from the 3D printing revolution, which will allow for in-home personal manufacturing of all kinds of new, never-thought-of products and designs. And following that, fueled by the open crowdsource of personal innovation, the robot revolution will give us the next waves of Tesla, Gates, and Jobs. The next 20 years, you will see the world change by new empowerment of the individual inventor. The danger, however, will come if people do not understand where they can go it alone and where they can't. Science has evolved as a very complex organization to self-correct and prevent errors. It is conservative and does not make any claims about anything they don't have enough evidence for, even if the media makes it sound as if a potential correlation means absolute certainty. Prior to this institution and self-correcting infrastructure, while science was divided between philosophy, art, and engineering, there was no way to fact-check most things about reality. Because of our evolved biases, our need for closure, religion had the majority monopoly on certainty and truth, and when science began to form and began to challenge religion's authority, there was a significant backlash. Religion has since placed the brakes on science, social, and political progress, slowing us down as a species. Religion has even delved into developing cult science of creationism, a term used first by Richard Feynman referring to the cargo cults. If you're unfamiliar with cargo cults, also check out Archifantasy's video on this subject. Cargo cults occur in the South Pacific Islands, where they recreated runways and air traffic towers, going through the motions without actually understanding the process in hopes a plane would land and bring them cargo. Cult science is the exact same way. Religious and pseudoscientific people will now write their own journals, peer review, in quotes, with our tiny pool of fellow believers, use cherry-picked, badly understood site sourcing, many times of their own prior works, and then act like they're being oppressed for not being allowed into mainstream journals. Just because you're doing all of that, if you can't prove your point using facts, you can't get through peer review, and they treat it as personal persecution. You're not a scientist, you're pantomiming science. The lone scientist will continue in the American myth and to be confused with the lone inventor, as cult sciences continue to get more and more creative about duplicating science without understanding the process. Authority on a science is not something that can be done alone or by amateurs. Until we can kill this misunderstanding, the progress of the planet will remain slow to reaching our true potential of peace and prosperity.